Line up. 7 minutes, ladies. Masters Division. Line up now. Numbers 42, 15, 34. 12 numbers were announced over the loudspeaker. Only 12 women in a room of 300 who were 60 or older. I hoisted myself to my feet and began to breathe because I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, this clammy feeling. It all came down to right now. I adjusted the strap of my posing suit and slipped my feet into the 5-inch regulation lucite high heels. And I stepped over to the corner of the room where there was a blue tarped corner where there were handlers waiting. I stood patiently like a show pony at a state fair while handlers re-glued my ass cheeks to the inside of my sparkly outfit and buffed my body glaze so that all the right contours were even. In a few hours, I would be sinking my teeth into a big, juicy Angus burger and hot, crispy, salty fries. But not right now. Right now, I was stage ready. 11% body fat, carved shoulders, chiseled legs, and flat, tight abs. The 12 of us dutifully lined up in order, waiting nervously for our time to go on stage. We shifted on one leg and then the other. We had rubber tubes that we would stretch to get our muscles pumped up again after sitting for so long. As we nudged forward, I could hear the rock anthem cue up, and we all got kind of tense, and we walked toward the stage, up the rickety wooden steps, grasping the handle for balance on those high heels I told you about. I could feel beads of sweat forming in my pits. I could feel my heart pounding. And I thought, I'm going to lose it. I felt my body lock up. Oh, don't lose your cool, Janet. Don't lose your cool. And then, like a warm wind, this thought washed over me that said, there are no more choices. The only choice is to go up those stairs and to do what you came here to do. And somehow, you're going to figure it out. And then, in that moment, the thought came to me. It was the words of the poet Maya Angelou, and it ticker-taped across the inside of my eyelids. I come as one, but I stand for 10,000. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about all of my sisters. This was about the accomplishment that I had done, magnified out to all of my sisters for whom the world deems over the hill. Then, all of a sudden, the present rushed back into my ears when I heard my number called. Number 47. 90 seconds. This was it. And I stepped my foot onto the stage. I was going to figure it out, and it wasn't about me. The spotlight found me and dragged me to the middle of the stage like a tractor beam. I stood on that X in the front of the stage, and like magic, my muscle memory took over, and I began my muscular poses and flowed and turned, spun around, and I looked at those judges in the front row, their dour faces looking at me over their half glasses, gripping their clipboards. And the audience was out behind I couldn't see them because the lights were so bright, but their raucous cheers and their roars were so encouraging. It was 90 seconds. yet time stood still. And then I heard, "Thank you, number 47." And I cheerleader waved, and I pivoted and strode off the stage, down the steps, kicked off those miserable heels, and walked barefoot back to the staging area. I did it. 20 years of culmination in that 90 seconds. I leaned back against the cold metal door on my hot skin, and I went back in time to 20 years before, where I was sitting in my doctor's office, and he was just looking at me and saying, "I'm sorry, Janet, but you are borderline obese. You have high blood pressure, and your cholesterol is through the roof. You're on your way to early heart disease, little lady." What was he talking about? I wasn't sick at all. This was just a routine checkup. Besides, I'd been an athlete, a competitive swimmer, a gymnast. In my teenage years and in my early 20s, clearly time had gone by. Because now, in my middle age, my resilience wasn't there anymore. As it turns out, the resilience that we're born with kind of peaks out in middle age. It peaks, and then there is this free fall. And on that way down is where we have to figure out where that born into us resilience has to come from now. He was scribbling on his little prescription pad and tore off the prescriptions and slid them across the table for me to take. And something happened in the back of my head. There was a stirring. It was a little voice. It was the voice of little Janet. Do you want to know what little Janet said? "You're not even giving your body a chance to try." I slapped my hand down on those sheets and looked at my doctor and said, "Give me 6 months." It was a desperate plea. He said, "Are you bargaining with me?" I said, "Seriously, in 6 months, if my labs aren't better, I'll take your prescriptions." So I was really gambling on the fact that he would have faith in me, and he did. I made the 6-month appointment, left the office, and that very afternoon I hired a trainer. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have a plan here. I had made a bargain. I had no plan. And then I found out that I was going to be working out at 5 a.m., crazy, 3 days a week at 5 a.m., even more ridiculous, and then to keep that up for 6 months. Well, I wasn't hip to doing that at all, but I didn't have any other way to figure out how I was going to do this. I had to trust that this was the right direction. So on it went. I began, in little steps, figuring it out. And you know what I learned? When I showed up at the gym door and I felt terrible, hadn't slept well, if I showed up and I had my shoes on, my trainer would take over and I could get stronger. And stronger I did get, day after day, week after week. 6 months finally went by, and I found myself back in my doctor's office. Just from working out alone and exercising regularly, I had lost 38 pounds. But what about the labs? Was that enough? Please. This time, he didn't have his prescription pad in front of him. He smiled at me reluctantly, shook his head and said, "Well, I'm really surprised, but I do have some good news. All of your labs are within the safe range. That cholesterol, though, right on the border. I want to see you in 6 months. You'd better not quit." Okay. So, first bargain delivered. But now what? Now I knew that I had the heart disease under control, I knew that after 6 months, I wasn't going to stop wanting to work out. It was now part of my lifestyle. But the problem is, I needed a new goal. Right about that time, these two women showed up at my gym at 5 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, just like me, working out with a different trainer right over there. And I watched them like a hawk because they were ripped. They were carved and lean and fit. It just was like stunning. And then I saw something that really blew me away. They were lifting the same weights that I was lifting. They were pushing and pulling and squatting the same weights. And I said to my trainer, why do they look like that? And I look like this, and we're doing the same amount of work. Because I was still a little fluffy. And he said, oh, Janet, they're getting ready for a physique bodybuilding competition. It's in 5 weeks. They have to eat in a very calculated way. Their nutrition is strategic. I said, do you mean the only thing standing between this and that is strategic eating? He said, yup, and it's really hard. Most people quit, and you wouldn't like it. Challenge accepted. Do you know that there are people out there who are nutrition consultants who specifically do competition preparation? Yep. And 11 months later, I was on my first competition stage. It seemed like a ridiculous idea when I look back because I couldn't have imagined that. And after that first competition, 20 years later, I was on that age 60 and over stage. Could I have imagined that, sitting there in my doctor's office, hearing the diagnosis of almost obesity and high blood pressure? Not a chance. It had just happened over time by just starting, having a little faith. The fear I felt on that day was enough to kick me into action, but taking those little steps and figuring it out along the way is really what got me there. And that's what resilience is. It's figuring it out. I mean, think about it. In your own life, the difficulties that you've had, the obstacles that you've had to overcome. From the beginning of your life till this day, you're still alive. You're listening to me speak. You figured it out. You have resilience in your wheelhouse. And in this big little miracle we call life, there is always going to be a wrong turn, a washed out road, a shitty MRI, or a lost promotion. Doesn't matter, because you have resilience. And whatever you are facing, you will figure it out. Thank you.